Hi, I'm Russ Mitchell, Vice President of Broadcast for the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. This is round 2 of our interviews with candidates for the 11th District Congressional seat. In this session, you will see 4 interviews, 20 minutes each, with the candidates this time around. And those candidates are John Barnes, Laverne Gore, Tariq Shabazz, and Shirley Smith. A reminder for you, early voting begins on July 7th. The special primary is on August 3rd, and the general election is on November 2nd. On behalf of GCLEABJ, thanks for watching, and please vote.
I'm Harry Boomer, member of the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. I am pleased today to be participating in a series of interviews of the congressional candidates for the 11th Congressional District. It is my honor to welcome to this conversation this morning Representative John Barnes. And Representative Barnes, how are you? Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Harry. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's going to be a nice day, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about you and why you want to run for Congress. In that regard, sir, let's just start. Let me give you an opportunity to give me your 1-minute elevator pitch as to why you are the best candidate or should be elected to the 11th Congressional District for the state of Ohio.
Well, Harry, I hear the words experience from people all the time. I'm qualified, I'm experienced, and I have the most extensive track record of getting things done for our community. I have worked and helped with creating around 19,000 jobs and sustaining jobs and about almost $1 billion in capital investment. We brought in infrastructure dollars. We worked to ensure that minorities had participation in the Opportunity Corridor project. We returned $2 million to the Harvard Community Service Center to help single moms and teens and young men. $500,000 to City of Warrensville for senior programs to buy a bus and work on nutrition. In Bedford Heights, we supported the Bedford Historical Society. And also in Maple Heights, we returned $100,000 for seniors. We have worked on noise walls along I-271, both in Pepper Pike and also in the city of Mayfield Heights. We returned $500,000 to the city of Shaker Heights to promote green space and commercial attraction, which we're very proud of, and then $5 million to help bring in Amazon to North Randall and Euclid, Ohio. So I think that our track record is very extensive. We want to have first-class constituent services. We want to do a COVID-19 pandemic intervention, senior programs, job creation, healthcare choice, and
all right, sir. Thank you on that. No problem on that. We want to try to get through a number of issues and questions. So
sure.
We want you to be able to fully answer, but keep in mind, we want to get through as many as we can. Now, you just told us why you're qualified. Now, tell us why you want to represent the 11th Congressional District.
I think that we're in a unique period in history. I think that our experience of working, let's face it, I'm not a pretender. I'm gonna tell it like it is. We have moved up into the unfortunate category as the most impoverished city in America. And then we have the city of East Cleveland that likewise is the most impoverished in the state of Ohio. I think that my focus on economic development and then also having a responsive team of people who have worked to respond to the common needs of the people and our constituents qualifies us to step right in and go to work and get it done for Northeast Ohio.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. You gave us reasons you want to be the next representative from the state of Ohio. Now talk about, from your perspective, what is the biggest issue facing the 11th Congressional District?
The biggest issues facing the 11th Congressional District is that we are uniquely situated in an area of the country that has uneven economic growth. We have an education system where we have about 3 out of 10 students who are going to colleges and universities, 1.5 out of that, and then 7 out of 10 students that some are graduating, but others leave our public school systems without any skills. I want to make sure that we work on the issues of skills, its relationship to economic development and growth in the community, so that we can partner with people in the business community so that we can develop a better tomorrow for our community and those students in the future. If we invest today, we will reap the benefits long term.
All right, sir. Thank you. Now, you have been in this political game, as you have mentioned. Go ahead. You wanted to say something else in addition? Quickly?
Well, just a question. Is there a period of time in which I have to respond? Because I don't want to go over, and I want to be respectful of the process.
Well, I appreciate that. We want you to answer fully, but just be mindful of the fact we only have a total of 20 minutes with you. And that's it. All right.
Great.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, you have been in this game of politics for a very long time, twice as a state representative here in Ohio. You've been in city government at City Hall here in the city of Cleveland. You have some background in taxes and the Department of Community Relations and all of that, a senior tax auditor and investigator for the City of Cleveland Taxation Division. Talk about how those things qualify you to best those others who are running for the 11th Congressional District, and why you decided to get back into politics, if you will.
Machiavelli said that the reason there would be no change is because the people who stand to lose from change have all the power, and the people who stand to gain from change have little of the power. I'm one of those individuals who understands both sides of the spectrum, and based on my experiences in government, I was first hired in government by Mayor Voinovich. And I think that the experiences with the Special Efficiency Improvement Task Force and understanding the institution of government is extremely important in these challenging times, so that you know where to go to get what you need to get done. And building relationships that will bring people together to work together. There's a lot of emotion out there about this, that, or the other, a lot of promises that are just not possible to achieve. But I think that what we have to do is be real with people. We have to give them insights into how their government can assist them with small business. When I see a small business that is operating, and I walk into a person that they sell great donuts, right? And you walk in and you ask them a question, how many donuts do you get out of a bag of flour? And they ask you, should I know that? That means the government is not providing the kind of assistance to communities and helping to build a better tomorrow for communities by providing opportunities and exposure to jobs, and also to the technologies that our government pays for at each level, at the local level, at our community college level, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Let's move a little bit to the national level, if you will, because you will be a U.S. representative from Ohio, not just an Ohio representative at the State House in Columbus, as you formerly were. Let's talk about the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and your thinking on that. It is seemingly stalled. It is passed in the House. It has not yet been passed in the U.S. Senate. You're thinking about how you would impact on this very important, if you deem it so, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act.
The John Lewis Voting Rights Act has passed out of the House. It's over in the Senate, as you say. One of the things that I would be engaged in is getting to know my colleagues over in the Senate, to springboard off the office of Senator Sherrod Brown and Rob Portman, so that I could begin to build relationships, so I could talk about why the John Lewis Act is important for America. and why we have a responsibility not only here at home, but to set an example around the world about the importance of democracy and its relationship to giving people a reason to believe they have a stake in the future. Right now, many Americans feel betrayed by the system. And that's why we're seeing across the nation so many responses, resistance, that should not have to happen if our government is running properly. So my building relationships and providing my perspective will contribute significantly to getting it done.
To your point, more than 250 bills have been proposed or passed in 43 states around the country. We only have 50 states in this country, and there seems to be a move to try to erode access to the ballot box or to make it more difficult for folks to do that. That brings up HR 1. Talk about why that is important to you and what you do to further HR 1.
Well, I think that what we're seeing from the president will contribute significantly to giving people confidence in the system. I mean, if you look at the numbers of people that we have registered today, we have the vote. We just have to get our vote to the poll. And people are inspired. Those of us that are part of the political system, people like you, Harry, who are journalists that have keen insights on processes. The normal person out there, they don't have time. They're trying to get along with the system so that they can provide for their family. We have to get things done. We cannot pretend a statistic comes out there that says this, that, or the other. So people will listen and respond to action on these issues that are important towards lobbying those legislatures where you have these bills that are coming up to bringing about change in a way. And we have to, as I'm a Democrat, we have to broaden our appeal to people by opening up in different ways so that we can get those people out there who are not voting to recognize the importance of their responsibility.
All right, sir, thank you on that. Speaking of that, you talked about going to Congress and working with your colleagues. There is a very contentious nature in the U.S. Congress these days. Democrats on one side of the aisle, Republicans on one side of the aisle. That has always been the deal, but there is this war going on in Washington, D.C. right now between the Democrats and the Republicans, and some saying that one part of the Congress is not really listening to the American people. Where are you on bipartisanship, and are you willing to stick with the party and fight for what you believe in the Congress where you, if you were to be elected, and or would you try to work across the aisle, as Joe Manchin and Krista Sinema are doing, to try and get some of these things passed? Because it looks like not much of the Biden administration agenda is going to get passed if they don't get rid of the filibuster. So let me ask you about that as well. The filibuster, we have about maybe 5 minutes, so if you could, I'd appreciate that.
I think that the filibuster process has some problems. It doesn't respond to the one man, one vote, or one person, one vote theory of political process. And so that need to be revisited, that need to look at, because if you have the majority, as we do now, there are certain things that we have to get done for the American people. And I think that Joe mentioned in terms of what he's doing, he's representing the people who elected him. And I'm not going to question his thinking about that. I may disagree with it, but I'm not going to question his thinking. He has to make decisions about what's important to his constituents, and I have to assume that that is the case. Having said that, though, we are Democrats, and I think that we have got to move on certain areas to protect the integrity of our democracy and to give people confidence in the election process and to ensure that their government does not appear to the average person as being rigged. And so we We must move on. We have to make decisions. When you're in charge, you have to make decisions to move things forward. And that's sometimes unfortunate. Having said that, in Columbus, where I served for many years, my party doesn't control anything down there. And so you have to build relationships, because the poorest Ohioans live in the districts that we represent. And so we have to give them encouragement and help them to appreciate that there is a great opportunity. For instance, I got
so let me stop you there, because time is going to run out. And
Okay.
I do want to talk about policing and the George Floyd incident, and also the information that is releasing George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. If you could briefly talk about that and the importance of policing in the communities and making sure this act is passed also by the U.S. Senate, because it is passed in the U.S. House. Briefly, sir.
Well, I think that some of the response from local officials around the country is the old political two-step. It speaks to almost a political rope-a-dope. It's important to focus on the hiring process of individuals that are coming into the system. We do not have a process nationally that looks at that. So one of the things that I want to focus on in the United States Congress, and I support wholeheartedly the George Floyd Act, but I think that we've got to focus on who's hired. When someone comes into the personnel office of any given municipal or county organization, they make a decision on who's hired. It is not their representatives, their union representatives. And so there is a big discussion going on about the divisiveness of that process. The divisiveness begins and ends with who makes the decision to hire, and whether or not we have properly vetted those individuals that are coming into the system. So if someone comes in and they've had a questionable behavioral activity in the department they left, then if you bring them in, that should be a part of the process of making a decision as to whether or not they are a good fit in a city like Cleveland that is under a federal consent order, or in any other city that has had situations like that.
Sir, how do you hold police accountable?
My attention.
How do you hold police accountable? We have maybe 30, 40 seconds. How do you hold police accountable? They always say, well, I followed my training. And they don't always follow their training, but that's debatable, I guess, I don't know the time. How do you hold them accountable to make sure they turn on the body cams and don't turn them off, that they don't put a knee on somebody's neck for 9 minutes and 39 seconds, or that people don't get stopped unnecessarily? And very briefly, I know it's unfair to ask you to answer this in a very short amount of time, but if you could, as best you can with the 30 seconds we have left.
Well, I think, Harry, that we hold them accountable through training and through the hiring process, the people that we're bringing in, and ask who's making those decisions. And when they get there, there's one thing: you have to eliminate the systematic corruption that holds down how statistics and how information flows. If you have officers out there and you have, this game that goes behind the scenes, and then they get into a situation, the expectation is that they be protected. And so systematically, we've got to look at and here locally, we have to look at how we can ensure that the federal consent order plays a role in that. Because if you look at Article 18 of the Ohio Constitution, that policing authority is not just with the police department, it's with the building department, it's with the health department. And in those other two instances, we just saw the other day where an official of the building department pled guilty. Well, we have a health department that can't even respond to getting in a grant proposal on time to fight AIDS.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Time has run out, but I did want to give you, and I think we started about, can I give you literally 30 seconds? Your closing push, pull, asking folks to endorse you or vote for you, whatever you want to say in the last 30 seconds. So this has to be a hard 30 seconds. Representative Barnes, go for it.
This election is a hiring process. And through this process, we must look at who is the best qualified to move the 11th Congressional District focus forward. And so my focus is on responding to the people, putting people first, and doing our due diligence to build a better tomorrow around the idea of integrity, honesty, and focuses that are going to respond to promoting growth opportunities for Northeast Ohio.
Excellent, sir. I really appreciate your taking the time and talking with us about your priorities, your positions, and your stances on various things affecting not only Northeast Ohio, but the United States of America, and that you will be, should you be elected, U.S. representative from the state of Ohio, 11th Congressional District. Representative Barnes, thank you again for being here and gracing the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists with your presence. And we thank you, sir, and good luck in your round.
I'd like to thank the Black journalists for having this forum. I think it's an extremely important public service. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Be well.
Bye, you too.
All right. That wraps up this particular interview. There are others to come following me, so I'll turn it back over to the host, and thank you very much for watching. I'm Harry Boomer. Take care.
I'm Russ Mitchell, Vice President of Broadcast for the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. Thanks for sticking around with us as we go to round two of our series of candidates for the 11th Congressional District. The interviewee for me is a Republican running in the race, Laverne Gore. Mrs. Gore, how are you today?
I'm always good. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Sure. Thank you very much for doing this. We've got about 20 minutes. I'm going to try to keep it moving pretty quickly because we've got a lot of ground to cover. You ran for this seat back in November of 2020 against Marcia Fudge, the incumbent, and you got 20% of the vote. She got 80%. You got 20%. Mm-hmm. Other than not running against an incumbent this time, why do you think that the outcome in this race will be different?
One of the things that I did see when I was going, it was a commentary on the President of the United States. The media, which you're a part of, kind of was very, very active in making sure that the vilification of the Republican brand was there. And I think that it wasn't something that was easily overlooked. I mean, we had a president that was not, can we say, popular with half of the country. And we had some issues that were we had a great economy. We had some good things happening, but, we also had a country of discontent. And I think that the discontent was that a lot of things boiled over. I tell people that if you put things in a pressure cooker long enough, they will explode. And, you don't take the time to ease it off gently. And I think that's what Black Lives Matter was. People were just frustrated. They saw what happened with George Floyd. They were going through the motions of understanding what our country had become, was, and the future seemed kind of not so bright. So they were angry. And my Republican brand didn't overcome the fact that the District 11 that I live in, that I grew up in, that I have lived in my entire life, other than for travels abroad and things, is in a terrible, terrible place.
I want to come back to that. Wait, I want to come back to what you just spoke
about.
Okay,
well, I didn't finish, but okay.
I understand, but I want to come back to what you said, but let me ask you, and we talked about this before, just kind of give me a boilerplate again. Why do you want to be the Congresswoman from the 11th Congressional District?
You know what, Russ? I'm tired. I am so tired of seeing my community destroyed. I am so tired of the fact that we, as humans, are mistreated. We go through life and we suggest to ourselves that there's a quality of life that we all expect. When I go through the neighborhoods and when I go through the senior buildings, when I go through the inner cities of the 11th district, which we are the number one, inclusive of the number one poorest district, in America, I say to myself, we can do better than this. But we keep electing and we keep promoting the same type of identification. If you put a Democrat behind your name, then it doesn't matter if you do your job. It doesn't matter if we're poor. It doesn't matter if our children are uneducated. It doesn't matter if crime is out of control. You can just walk out your door. You don't have to, I don't know where I think you do live in the 11th district.
I do.
You can walk out your door in certain neighborhoods, and it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. People are not safe. Our children are not being educated. Our streets are not clean. There are healthcare disparities. All of this is happening, yet we have had the same leadership for the last 10 years. When I ran against Marcia Fudge, I said the same exact thing. And now we have 6 other people that are running saying, I am a former elected official. And because I'm a former elected official, and your communities still look the same way they do, and you still have nothing going in the direction of positive influences for our children. All of that's happening. And we have people who can sit on stage and who are running for office who are saying, I've been there before, I've been a candidate. We have one candidate who even says that the last candidate said I should be the one. How can we continue to accept the inferior leadership that we've had? I know you made it a point of saying we have a Republican here. I don't know what that means. What you have here is an American.
I make that point because the other candidates we've had on have been Democrats, and you're running in the Republican primary. So obviously that's who you are.
Yeah, but
so
I'm not running against them, right?
You're not running against them right now, but you will at some point in the general election. So, obviously it's important to point out that you're a Republican. I meant no disparaging comment by that. It was more descriptive. That was a descriptive comment. But let me ask you this. You mentioned several issues there regarding the 11th district. What do you think the biggest issue is facing the district, and how would you fix it?
Poverty.
How would you fix it?
Miseducation. I think one of the things we have to do, I was reading an article today about the young woman the African-American woman that just got elected to the mayor of Compton, right? And I don't know if you've heard about her. The most important thing she said during her election was the fact that we have to educate our population. We have to educate and we have to train them for jobs. We have to train them to be responsible citizens who can uplift themselves. We have school system here, but we are failing in the school system. And I know everybody likes to applaud when we get a D, but we have to retrain our people. We have to make sure that these healthcare disparities, healthcare is very, very important. Our community suffers with diabetes. They suffer from infant mortality ratios that are disgusting. This is the 11th district, and we also suffer from poverty. We have to take a serious look at that. We have to open up these schools, and we have to be more conscious of what we're doing and making sure that our students are being trained for the future. We have to make sure that they are getting the same type of respect that every other student gets, every other child gets. It comes down to reading, writing, and arithmetic. And when you have a 62% illiteracy ratio in the 11th district, then somebody doesn't care. Or if they don't care, if they do care, then maybe they're not equipped with any solutions. I have my MBA, my MED in adult education and adult education. And I can tell you, I'm very, very conscious and concerned about the education of our population. I have my MPH. I have a master's in public health, and I am extremely concerned about minority group populations. Extremely concerned about that. I have my undergraduate degree in economics, so I understand that here we have healthcare, we have education, and we have healthcare disparities. And all of those issues are very, very important.
Yeah.
To what's happening in District 11.
I'm going to go back to what we talked about at the top, and you talked about the political climate back in November of 2020. And you've kind of answered this, but let me ask it just so you can tell me in your own words. as a candidate, as a Republican candidate.
You want to talk about Republicans again? Go ahead.
Look, I'm not talking about Republican. I'm talking about you. You're a Republican running.
All right, I am a Republican. Yes. I'm teasing you, Russ.
I know. I knew you were going to do this, but I'm just teasing you back. As a Republican running in the 11th Congressional District, which obviously, and you say it on your website, you know, it's a blue district. What's your biggest challenge as a candidate?
I'm sorry?
As a Republican running in a blue district, what's your biggest challenge as a candidate?
My biggest challenge is convincing the people of the 11th district that they deserve better. They deserve better than the leadership that has been presented to them in the past and present. That's my biggest challenge, convincing them that, as you say, the Republican is not something to be frightened about, because see, I see myself as a bridge. I see myself as a bridge to half of the country. You see, when you're Black and you're Republican, then you have to say to yourself, I'm not going to Washington to say, oh, I'm going to do this with I'm going to represent the people of the 11th district. And you also are aware that this is going to be redistricted after this, right?
Right.
You're aware of the redistricting.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. But in this, but it hasn't been redistricted yet.
No, yes, it doesn't.
It will be after this.
My biggest challenge for this election is to make sure that they understand that the caring, the concern, and the intensity of what I consider necessary reform does not stop, but it's enhanced by me. I want them to look at me. I don't want them to always, every time I get on stage with one of the candidates, she's a Republican. Okay, I don't want that to be what the people of the 11th district see. What I want them to see is hope. I want them to see that they deserve better. I want them to see that they have an opportunity to make a decision that will enrich their lives and the lives of their children. I don't like hearing gunshots outside of my window every night, but I do. I hear gunshots outside of my window almost every night. And I live in a relatively safe neighborhood. I want the people of District 11 to help me with my biggest challenge. I want them to understand that I want to help them. I want to help their children. I want to make sure their seniors are treated fairly. I want to make sure that there's healthcare that's available. I don't want to just give lip service to the fact that I'm a Democrat and that's all I need to be. The people of the 11th district deserve so much better.
A couple of more questions on this front, and I promise that we'll leave here. And again, looking at your website, I think one of your YouTube clips is on how Donald Trump needs the 11th district. Again, this was in the last election, 2020.
Sure.
If Donald Trump ran for president in 2024, would you support him?
If he had the same policies that he did, I think that Donald Trump, as I told you, he needed the 11th district, and that's very true. He needed the 11th district because he did not come and talk to the people of the 11th district. That was my concern all along. You don't need to always send emissaries to come and talk to my community. And my community is, I'm Black, I'm Catholic, I'm all of those things. But you, the president, should have come and talk. He should have come and presented himself. You don't always have to send somebody to talk to me. Just like I'm talking to you now.
Yeah.
He should have came, and I told everybody around him, you need the 11th district and you need to make yourself known in the 11th district. So there's nothing that we can do to you. And sometimes a champion has to go in front of the audience and do what he has to do. Yes.
So to make sure I understand this correctly, so in 2024, assuming it's still Donald Trump, same policies.
He's not going to run.
Well, that was my question. If he runs in 2020,
now. You're talking about
my question is, if he runs, my question is,
you want to go to 2024?
You don't want to answer that.
So you can say I'm a Republican again?
My question is
that what you want to do, Russ?
The question is, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want. In 2024, if Donald Trump runs for president again, would you support him?
This is about now, Russ. This is about now, 2021. This is about a special election. And I kind of understand where you're at with this, because you're trying to make it, it appears that you're trying to make it about Donald Trump again. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying
I'm asking you a question.
to make
You
this
supported,
about the
you
people
supported Donald
in
Trump.
the 11th district.
All right,
and
I'll
I'm
move
talking
on.
about
I'll move on.
2021 is what I want to talk about. And if you want to talk
it.
about that with me, I'll talk about it with you.
I get
but
it.
in 2024,
let's move on to 2021.
if you want to come back and ask me this again,
okay.
I will do that with you.
All right, Mrs. Gore. Let's talk about 2021 then. Fair?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's why I came here today.
All right. Last month, Congress, the House, voted to establish a commission to look at the January 6th attack on the Capitol. 217 Democrats voted yes, 35 Republicans joined them, 175 Republicans voted no. If you had been in Congress and the issue had come up to establish this commission to look into the January 6th attacks, would you have voted yes or no?
You know what, Russ? I'm not afraid of a commission. I am not afraid of a commission. And I think that anybody that is afraid of a commission has something to hide. I don't think a commission is anything that anyone should have been afraid of. I don't. I was talking to, I think it was Dave Joyce, and he voted for it. And I don't think there's anything to hide. And I think having a commission about 1/6 is not something that anybody should be afraid of. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with the 11th district, and that's what I came to talk about.
Well, you would you would represent.
Yeah, but I would have probably said there's nothing to hide from the commission.
Right. Okay. Let me, again, if you are elected, you'll represent the 11th district, of course. The issue of reparations came up, and a House panel did an unprecedented thing earlier this year and voted to move that issue to the full House later on, to study reparations, not to actually grant them at this point, just to study reparations. It was the vote on that, I believe, was 35-17. 35 Democrats and 17 Republicans voted no. If the issue of slavery reparations had come up on your watch, if you were on that committee, and again, this is just to establish a committee to look into it, not to grant them yet. How do you think you would have voted on that?
You know, I'm going to go out on a limb on this, and I'm going to talk about if I had been there. I would have voted yes. I would have voted yes. I think we do need to look at that, because there is something god-awful wrong when a certain community hasn't advanced.
Something happened there. No, oh, there you are. You're back.
I think it's awfully, no, I would have voted.
Gotcha. Let's talk about the election, this year in the general election.
Okay.
No, I know.
Wow.
I get it.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. In the general election, you are likely to face a candidate who is going to fall in several categories. And you brought this up earlier. Either they've been in office, they've served as a leader of their party, or they have a substantial war chest to fight any sort of potential rival. Some polls came out this week, and they're only polls. I'm just going to go by them and kind of give some names here. I want you to give me a sentence or two on each candidate. Do you mind doing that?
If I don't want to do it, I won't answer it, but go ahead.
Okay. Jeff Johnson.
Okay. Past elected official. Okay.
Okay. All right. Chantel Brown.
I know. Past elected official.
Nina Turner.
Way past elected official.
As you look at the election in November, is there any one of those candidates I named or any other candidate that you would prefer to face?
I don't care which one it is. I just want one. I think if we threw them all in a bowl together, we wouldn't come out with much difference between all of them. And you're saying the war chest. I think that's an insult to the 11th district, that, formidable war chest. So we're buying elections now? Is that what happens? Is it because our communities are definitely in disrepair? We can just buy the election, even though we have a leadership base that is questionable at best, because I look at this leadership base and I look at my community and I suggest to you that there's a problem. But you didn't ask me about all the candidates. I was just getting excited.
I was just going by the polls there. Yeah, we only have 20 minutes. I can ask about all of them. Okay, we've only got a minute and a half left, and I want to give you the chance once again to make your pitch. And I was reading your bio page, and you said, it was very poignant. My American dream began on East 92nd and Huff on Cleveland's east side. I'm one of 9 children, a lifelong resident of Cleveland and of the 11th district. You talked about your father working as a steelworker and a lithographer, and your mother, Josephine, who worked as a nurse. Encourage all 9 of you to dream.
Thank you.
No,
and they were great parents.
So let me ask you, the minute we have left, as we write our stories here, those of us who are members of this organization, what do you want members of the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists to know about you? And again, I've got about a minute left.
You know what I want them to know? I want them to know that I haven't given up and I haven't stopped fighting. I want them to know that I don't have any old antics from my grandma, but what I do have is a strength that comes from good parents, a solid education, and the things that our community needs. I believe, and here I'll throw in the Almighty, I believe that God wants better. He wants better for our community. I have the credentials. I have the capacity to lead. And as I look at the people that are behind me, those that Democrats, I say to myself, the 11th district deserves better. And we all know we deserve better. And all you got to do is walk down your streets. Look at my credentials, look at their credentials, and go outside and see what your community needs, what my community needs. We've had enough of the past. Is that it?
We're getting the hook. Laverne Gore, thank you so much for being with us today. As always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And we will talk as we move forward. How's that?
I agree. And I still have my AOL account, so you know how to reach me.
Me too. You know how that is. Me too. We're of that era that we certainly have.
Take care, 11th district.
Thanks again.
I'm coming
so much.
for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
That you too. You too. And for the members, next up we have Mr. Larry Gardner with Tariq Shabazz. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Hello.
Bye.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry H. Gardner. I am a member of the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. We are still doing our round of interviews. This is round 3 of 4 of the Congressional 11 district interviews. The seat that has been vacated by Marsha Fudge because she was got hired by a part of the Joe Biden administration. So we're talking to our candidate, Mr. Tariq Shabazz. Good afternoon, good morning, or good afternoon, Tariq. How are you, sir?
How you doing? How you doing? First, I want to say something to you. You have been the reporter or journalist, the first for everything. You were my first radio visit, and you were my first that I'm not wearing a suit on. But
well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, quickly tell us, why do you want to be elected to be the Congressional District 11 person in Ohio?
All right, number one, I want everybody to recognize some things about me. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, so I know a lot of the many of the things that people are going through. I know the trauma, as I've talked about multiple times before. I grew up in an environment where all we saw was nothing but gun violence. We saw death. We saw lack of economic opportunity. We saw the things that don't contribute to actually having a better life for the individuals who actually are the residents in those communities. So that being said, that was one of those things that was a driving force for me that propelled me to want to get into a life of public service. So I went into the United States Navy in 2014. I served for 5 years. I served honorably. I graduated top of my class within the Navy. I made E1 to E5 in less than 2 years. And if anyone who here doesn't know anything about it, check it out. It's not a very easy thing to do. And that's all a testament of the actual work that I will put in. I want to bring policies such as reparations. I want to bring policies like Medicare for all when we have over 50% of our actual bankruptcies are associated with medical debt. I want to make sure we have a much improved environment. I want to make sure that we get past the Equality Act. I want to get all of these things passed because it is absolutely necessary that we have a country that is predicated on the basis of improving the lives and removing the plight of our Americans. Thank you.
Okay, that's wonderful, wonderful pitch. The thing is that, first of all, I thank you very much for your Navy military service. I know Memorial Day is past, and also congratulate you on your graduation as well. I saw that. But one thing is that you have faced pretty much one of the obstacles you were faced is the first thing is lack of experience in politics. Now, how would you use your military background to overcome the lack of experience being in committees and sitting in congressional districts?
Well, number one, I want to say something. One of the biggest things about that is that I am a political scientist. So that's number one, that I want everyone to understand that I do have a comprehensive understanding of the legislative process in itself. I am very aware that for you to actually implement some of these changes, you need to get in some of these committee assignments. Right now, as I don't believe there's any Black veterans or any in the Armed Services Committee, and that will contribute to, if I'm in the Armed Services Committee, to work towards actually improving the lives of our actual military personnel, such as some of the things like you asked me about my military background. I know some of the things that a lot of these candidates don't understand very well because I have served. I know the mental aspects and things that come with being in the life of the service. The reason why we're at a point where we have 22 veterans committing suicide a day. I know for a fact if I am in this seat that you know that my mind is thinking that. And I'm a person of many hats. And when I say person of many hats, it's not just saying that I have many jobs that I've held. It's because I relate to so many individuals in so many walks of life. Because I've served with so many people, so many different walks of life. I know that when I get into Congress, I will be able to have that ability to utilize my soft powers definitely more in terms of removing some of the military DoD funding that is not associated with improving the lives of our personnel, but contributing more to war overseas, which is what people hear me talk about a lot. We contribute far too much to wars overseas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so pretty much another thing is that you're going against machines, people that have been in politicians before. How do you overcome that, never having served in an office?
Well, number one, I think that something that's glossed over a little bit too much is number one, that many of these machines that we're talking about, they're banking on low voter turnout. No matter what, they're banking on low voter turnout, somewhere around 20 to 30%. Now, that works in their favor, but if you look at how many candidates that they have still in this race, they're splitting many of their votes. I'm pushing out heavily to get that youth vote, that 18 to that 34, 35 years old. And if you check the statistics, we could do very well if we rack up those percentages of those voters. And that's why it's going to require more of that grassroots movement, which we've been heavily doing in those heavily impacted, neglected areas of this district. That many of my colleagues won't ever even walk down those areas. They'll just get someone to put a sign down there and move away. I go into those areas and we get those people registered and we go and we really reach the hearts of those people. So I actually believe it's not going to go the way that these machines think it's going to go.
Right. You said low voter turnout. That's the biggest issue pretty much that I always talk about. How do you get people to vote for you? How do you engage in the communities that District 11 represents to get higher voter turnout and vote for you so you can represent District 11 in Congress? How do you do that?
All right, now that's a good question. And I kind of want to go scale it back to even in the last election, in the 2025 primary. I was second in the 2020 primary with no media attention, no journalism, no interviews, none of those things were happening. And we got approximately about 3,000 votes. We know statistically speaking, it's not probably going to require more than 20,000 votes. Now, that is one of those things we have to continuously work on to keep building up on that. So we have reached out to many more of these young people and some of these organizations. And I honestly believe that if we continue on that pathway, we are going to win over the hearts of our people in this district, as well as talking to more of our senior community, our senior residents, and providing that bridge for them, letting them know that they're leaving it into good hands. Because quite frankly, in Congress, we have individuals who are going to make pieces of legislation that are going to affect our lives, my lives, my kids' lives, and my kids' lives. And it's imperative that the youth, the millennials, are starting to get into that pathway. And I know I hear all the time by many of these people, even in the Democratic Party, they say, we need more young people. We need more young people. But when the young people come up and we're not trying to say or do the same things that they want to do, we get stifled. They suppress that ability for us to rise above it. But it won't happen anymore. And that's why, because I'm here and I represent something very, very different. I represent progress. I represent something that a kid who came from nothing, and we are going to build something for everyone.
Okay. Now, the one thing that, there's another thing, bipartisanship. So how would you work with, you're a Democrat, you're in a Democratic race. How would you work with both Democrats and Republicans to get things done, particularly, passing stuff that would impact the lives of, you talked about reparations. How would you get that done as far as reparations? How would you do that if you were elected?
Okay, now that's a very important question. Right now, you see there's a heavy amount of influence and influence towards pushing out a reparations bill. As we saw that it came out of the Judiciary Committee, HR 40. But I believe we can go a little bit further than HR 40. We can actually implement a reparations bill, which will be about $10 to $12 trillion. Now, how do I get bipartisanship on that matter? Number one, some of the things you could do is vote for a vote in some form of fashion. Some of those things is finding that niche where we can get in and reach with some of these people. I know many conservatives think heavily and they feel heavily about their privacy. And I'm someone who pushes very heavily in terms of against the technocratic government, the system that we're going towards, where these companies, these digital companies, they hold far too much influence over personal identifiable information, which is where I come in. And I know that many conservatives actually tend to agree on those lines, where we talk about those things. So I'm pushing heavily for things like cybersecurity. And I know that we're going to get very much bipartisanship on that. I was the only candidate, if you look at it, I am the only candidate who talked about this all of last year. I said, we have the potential of being hacked, and it can cost us up to $1 trillion, which will let you know is this, that I am very serious about these things. And I know that I can reach these people in certain ways. We're not going to agree on every piece of legislation. We have to all understand that. As we can see right now, look at January 6th, the insurrection.
About to bring that question up. So go ahead.
Okay. So in terms of the January 6th insurrection, I've been one of the people who are going to continuously say this. We are in the civil rights movement right now. And if anyone doesn't believe it, look at the legislation that state legislators are pushing out. Anti-voting bills. They're putting out transgender bills. They're putting out all of these pieces of legislation because these are some of these individuals' last hurrah. They want to create policies that are going to last for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And that's why I say it's important that someone like myself is in this place, a young person who actually understands the dynamics of how this political process actually truly works. We have to really hold those individuals accountable.
Right. So, we got 10 minutes left. I'm going to ask about the George Floyd bill. What do you think about the George Floyd bill? And how would you, if you were elected, how would you pretty much sign legislation for police reform and
all right. Okay.
Minority?
I'm sorry, keep going. All right. So the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, I believe it's a very good bill in terms of the fact that you have a data reporting section of that bill that we can actually truly start holding these police officers accountable, and we can actually really have a more of accountable system in terms of law enforcement to see when we have the quote unquote bad apples. But I think we can go a little bit further. That's calling on to the DOJ, put more resources into the DOJ to really reopen many of these investigations, really checking on law enforcement itself, these agencies, to ensure that they're in accordance with their training compliance of each state, and as well as the guidance that's provided by the federal government. So for me, one of those things is I believe that I'm happy that it passed out of the House. We know the hurdle that's coming next is in the Senate, which people tend to segue next to is the filibuster. The filibuster itself is an archaic, outdated, and it was predicated on a racist principle. And the way that it was utilized early on was typically to attenuate civil rights legislation. And what are we seeing right now? Attenuating civil rights legislation. This is my point, why I said we are in the civil rights movement right now.
So you're saying that you weren't in the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s, so we're still in the civil rights movement. So
I'm saying this is the next go around. We've seen multiple variations of the civil rights movement. Even if you predate back to the Double V campaign, where I had our black soldiers and troops going into the war, and it was still desegregated up until it was actually desegregated. And then Then we segued into the civil rights movement where we hit the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which is why we talked about the Equality Act, which is going to amend the language in the 1964 Civil Rights Act that will now open up the ability for sexual orientation, preference, and gender identity as the things that should be protected by the government. And we're seeing heavily as how they pushed in so many of these Supreme Court justices. And is again, why? To affect the next 30, 40, 50 years of our lifetime of America.
Right. You pretty much, you said that earlier you was heading to the, this is Pride Month in June. So you're heading towards a Pride Parade, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. We're here. Actually, we're here right now. We're here right now. That's why you see me in this T-shirt. That's why we're in a T-shirt today versus a suit.
Okay, that's understandable. You look kind of cool there, Tariq. I just got to say that. So
I appreciate it.
You mentioned. Thank you. So you mentioned cybersecurity, and you mentioned other things. You know, a lot of people said if former President Trump would have quelled the pandemic early, then we wouldn't have the problem that we have with shutdowns and things of that nature. So how would you, as far as cybersecurity, what legislation would you try to get passed to stop hacking and other countries from hacking our security?
Okay, so number one, there's multiple elements to that. So what we're seeing, one of our biggest malicious cyber actors against America is the state of Russia. So specifically, Russia and the United States of America, we're going to start working more towards implementing a new START treaty. And in that START treaty, it has to hold accountable in terms of between both countries, offensive provocations of use of cyber attacks, sophisticated cyber attacks. As we know, Russia has been recognized as a culprit of multiple cyber attacks in our last years, like the SolarWinds hack. We've seen so many of these things internationally as well. So this is why we have to move towards those things. And on a federal level in this country, the things that we need to do is we need to hold our companies, our agencies accountable for their cyber. Our cyber hygiene is associated with the way that we handle privately identifiable information. So I'm going to push for legislation specifically that's going to bolster the cybersecurity by increasing more resources to our small businesses, because our small businesses in large do not recover from things like ransomware. You saw the Colonial Pipeline attack. That we saw how big of that could have affected us. Now imagine if they hit our energy grid systems, something like how in Texas. Well, Texas wasn't a cyber attack. Now imagine if it was something along the lines of those things. We can see that you can cripple an entire nation. I'm going to push more so we actually increase and both our cyber hygiene, reducing our cyber vulnerabilities, because right now we're in a very bad state. Look at what the Government Accountability Office states. It says that we have thousands and thousands of things that we need to implement right now. And that's why I am the candidate for those things. I may not be the candidate that everyone that has all the name recognition, but I guarantee you I'm the candidate that this district needs.
Right. We understand it. And I wanted to and thank you very much. We got like 4.5 minutes left. So we can get on with your day. I know you got like campaigning to do, and I got a football game to get through. So the thing about it is that let's break down what is the talk about which is the top needs that people need for District 11. People talk about education, healthcare, for communities, police reform, the consent decree. What do you see as far as needs, the priority needs for District 11 and top 4?
Well, I think I'll say it this way. There is a combination of things, and there's a myriad of issues that are actually plaguing our residents in District 11. Number one of which we got to talk about specifically is the economic side of it, where we have District 11 is recognized as one of the most impoverished districts in the country, as well as one of the most segregated districts in the country. The wealth is extremely segregated. So these are some of those things that has to happen, increasing the amount of grants for individuals in these places to actually get home ownership, for more businesses. Because as some people who disagree with reparations, there's still so many other things that I talk about that exceed beyond reparations. So number one, again, is going to be the economic side of things. Number two is going to be policing. And this is not in any specific order. I'm just saying these are things that are very important that needs to be addressed simultaneously. So policing, police misconduct, the use of force, as it's called. We need to hold not just police officers accountable, we need to hold prosecutors accountable that refuse to press charges on officers when they're clearly in the wrong, or the misconduct in these agencies where you see, like, for instance, the inconsistencies of releasing videos of when when an incident happens where a firearm has to be discharged by a police officer.
Okay.
We're seeing heavy delays and inconsistencies in when they're released, and that creates public distrust. And that's a very big thing, is improving public trust into the government. And as long as the government is still working on its way, it's moving, we're going to have these large levels of distrust in our communities. That's why when you go into the street, some of these people don't trust police officers at all. Why? Because when police officers typically come into their areas, it is typically associated with negativity and being hostile. And I think there's another way we can turn that part too. For the police officers who perceive that they're very fearful in these communities. I've heard the CPD union was talking about this, about how dangerous the streets are. Well, here's a thought. How about prevention as opposed to treating? Because if we actually invest heavily into those communities that's being neglected and left behind, we can substantially improve the insecurities that are there, like the human insecurities, the economic insecurities, right?
Right, exactly.
The food securities, the fact that when you go in many of these areas, there's no groceries, no grocery stores, there's no things for these people to have sustenance.
All right.
So
I hate to cut you short, but we only got 1 minute left. We had a great pitch. So the thing about it is that you know, I saw on your website saying this is our moment. Why this is our moment on your website when you're for Congress? Pitch to the people why they should vote for you over, you know, you said name recognition, going out, Nina Turner, Chantel Brown, Jeff Johnson, Don Barnes. Why should people vote for Tariq Shabazz for Congress, District 11?
I mean, we can call a spade a spade. The reality situation is this. Had I not ran against Representative Marcia Fudge the year before, and I ran into a district that was going against a Republican, my name would have been lifted so much higher than what it is already right now. And that's something I think we need to we need to talk a little bit about more. But we want to bring, because I want to bring these policies that are definitely going to improve the lives of our people. And it's time for a young person to be in these positions. It's time for a young person who actually understands how these things work. And starting on those local levels, it's not going to address the things that are systemic. It's going to address them specifically in a municipality. But I am running for the federal Congress to make sure we change things for our veterans, for our service members, so we bring reparations. A healthcare system is better for everyone, Medicare for all, an environment is better for everyone, and equal rights for every person in this country. So vote for Tariq Shabazz on August 3rd, 2021, and I appreciate you all. Please check out and reach out to us.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Shabazz. This is Larry H. Gardner with the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists with Tariq Shabazz, who's running for Congressional District 11. This is the third of the final interviews that are going to be happening. So we just got one more and then we'll be done. Thank you very much, Tariq. Thank everybody for listening and have a great day. This is Larry H. Gardner signing off.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Phelps. We're here with former Ohio State Senator Shirley Smith. She became the 4th Democrat to announce a bid for the 11th U.S. Congressional District to succeed Marcia Fudge, who is now appointed by the Biden administration as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Senator Smith, thank you so much for being with us for this second GCLEABJ 11th Congressional District Candidate Forum.
Thank you.
I have several questions for you, some from my colleagues and others I've prepared myself. So let's get started. From my colleagues, first, the obvious question. You've been to this party before. Why get back into the political game now?
Well, you said I've been to this party before. I certainly enjoyed the party. And when the party's good, you want to have more fun. And it was fun for me during the time I served. You know what? The reason I'm running is I truly believe in what this process tries to accomplish. quality health care, good education, women's rights, equal opportunities for everybody. Because you leave, well, let me just put it this way. I didn't leave the legislature because I wanted to. There are term limits in Ohio. If there had not been term limits in Ohio, Stephanie, I would still be there. I loved what I did, and I was good at it. I got a lot accomplished, and I want to do it again. And this is, to me, this is just the next step. This is what you strive for, to get to the top of the ladder. So of course, that's where I want to be. And like I said, I enjoyed it.
Okay. House Resolution 40, sponsored by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, would study slavery reparations for what is called the African Americans Act. Based on the information we already have in terms of racial inequality and inequity, in your opinion, is this study even necessary? And what would reparations look like to you?
Well, reparations for me is making sure that everybody is, let's just say in Tulsa. I think that everybody in Tulsa should be made whole. Other than that, I don't think that we could do reparations in a process that everybody could be made whole. I think that reparations mean people, you restore people to what they had previously before they were damaged or they were violated. That, to me, that's impossible. I mean, it's like being in a love affair, and if you're hurt and you feel that pain, I don't care what people give you, you cannot go back to where you were because you will always feel that pain. If you spent time in prison, you spent 20 years in prison, you were wrongly convicted, and then you get out, you can't take away that time that person has served. So you cannot, when you do reparations, you cannot restore people back to where they came from before that happened.
Okay, now you speak of Tulsa, and you said that you think that that is possible in Tulsa. What would the reparations look like in Tulsa, for example?
Well, I have to be totally honest. I have not gone over that scenario based on what I've seen in videos and on TV programs. There was actually wealthy people who had worked hard, who had built up a town or city that had been taken away from them. So, and it was known, it was widely known, and I just think that they should be made whole again. So what that would look like, I don't know, but there should be a process put in place so they could be made whole.
Okay, good enough, good enough. Again, this is a two-part question from my colleagues. First, what do you see as the biggest issue facing the 11th Congressional District?
Well, I think they're all big. Well, one of the biggest, I think, is unity. Of course, there are people without jobs. There's people without health care. All of those are huge problems. But when we talk about a district, I mean, because of those, the health care, because of education, and because of disparities, and because of incarceration, they affect the entire nation. But when you talk about the 11th district as a whole, what we're talking about is making sure that we unify ourselves so that we can get things done. There's very little, in my opinion, that have been accomplished in the 11th district in years because there has not been the right kind of leadership. And so I think that because of that, there's a lot of things that have become divisive. The politics have become divisive, people have become divisive, and there's no agenda to work towards unifying this district. So that is one of the biggest problems.
So some of what you said actually relates to the next question, which is, what do you see as your biggest challenge in this 11th district race?
That is up in the race?
Yes, in the race. What do you see as your biggest challenge in this race?
Well, see, I think running is a challenge in itself because you don't get the necessary resources from people like yourselves. You get people reporting the news, but do they fact find? You know, it's difficult to get the people, and I say the electorate, to look at the real issues, because we don't have, as candidates, really a medium to put it out there, because if we do, it seems like we are throwing dirt. So when people are running based on how much money they have, when people are running based on fabrications of what they've done, then how will people know, the electorate know, if the media doesn't do well what they should do in terms of educating people so they can make the best informed decision?
Can you speak to that further as far as what the media can do better in terms of fact finding? And can you give an example? I'm sure you've given somewhat of an example of that, but can you expand on that?
That's one of the easiest things that the media can do. We have these forums like this, and you ask surface questions. You know, I'm sure that you've gone on my website and you've looked at my background. And if there any of that stuff you can question, then you should question me. And anything on my website that seems like it could be bamboozling people, then you should question me about it. You should pull me on the red carpet. There's a candidate that's running that had multiple fabrications in her literature. And she's always said that she was the first Democrat to ever hold the Democratic position of the party. That's not true. George Forbes did it. After her, after him, there was Pat Britt, and then there was Sandra Williams. Nobody seems to question that. Nobody seems to care. It seems that reporters just want to do their job, get it done, and that's over. And I'm not being critical. I'm just pointing out facts. Okay. There's other things on the literature about sending kids to kindergarten or to preschool and all of these monumental things that person has claimed, and that's not true.
Okay, so, well, let's move on a little bit and talk about something that you have done as someone who seems to have pioneered a call for second chance and reentry concerning legislation and policy. What do you think Congress still needs to do in the push for reentry programming and resources?
Well, I would work towards, once in Congress, I would work towards building a complete, comprehensive database with sentencing structure. So there won't be this array of what I would call sentencing guidelines across the nation. It should be standard. When people are sentenced for murder, sometimes in a smaller county, they're able to get life in prison, whereas somebody like Cuyahoga County, they'll, of course, get the death penalty. So we need to make sure that the way we're sentencing people and the reason that we're sentencing people is structured and has that kind of right foundation. We can also look at closely at like bail reform. That should all be uniform across the nation. We shouldn't have all of these different bills across the nation that affect people differently.
Okay.
Disproportionately.
Thank you for that. There is a lot of discussion around qualified immunity, and considering that the courts have historically been in favor of law enforcement and protection under the doctrine, what are some specific ways that states and municipalities can be proactive in protecting the public from policing injustices?
I think they should, I think we should give police more training. Their failure to do their job is really based on what we give them to do their job with, which is very little, which is minimal. When you put a person on the job, I mean, and this has no comparison almost, but you can almost look at what I'm saying. When you send a doctor to school, you don't give him 30 months of training. And when you send a dentist to school, you don't give them 30 months of training. I mean, when you're talking about a police training, they probably have just in comparison, the same amount of hours as a beautician. But you're dealing with a person's lives, and so with a person's life. So when we're talking about police enforcement, you got to give them the right things to work with. You got to give them protection. You got to give them the right training. You got to put them in neighborhoods that they are accustomed to, or they're used to, or they've been at least introduced to. Police should certainly have at least 2.5 years of training, and then they should have internships in certain neighborhoods, in all neighborhoods, so that they will be more accustomed to and not feel that people in certain neighborhoods are aggressive. We also need to create a standard where police insure themselves through insurance companies, meaning that once they decide to become a police officer, they have to register with an insurance company, get insurance on themselves, which knocks down the liability on states or municipalities. Number two, it creates a database. So if that person have any offenses or violations or infractions against his or herself, then we can look at that data and say, you know what? This person should not be rehired anyway. But not only that, the insurance company will say, you know what, this person has too many violations, too many offenses, so we don't even want to insure you no more, making it so this person can't work. So there's a lot of things that we can put in place on a national basis to help our law enforcement and be fair.
Okay. Gun violence across the nation is on the rise. So is mental health awareness, domestic violence, and suicide. Do you think easy accessibility of guns by unauthorized and unlicensed individuals is the primary cause, or do you think it's secondary to the aforementioned issues? And what ideas would you take to Congress to combat this gun violence?
Well, I think what we've tried to do as a nation and as a people is do a broad brush stroke, and we can't do it because there's a lot of social ills in the urban community that are caused by being underserved. There are the mental case issues that could come from the same thing, of course, that are not being attended to. So we need to look at most of the cases that have happened. They are caused by people with mental illnesses, at least most of them. I don't believe in those high-powered weapons and all those assault weapons because it doesn't take that to kill a deer. So I don't believe going that far, but I do believe that we need to invest in our mentally challenged folks. And we need to give more attention to the underserved people in our underserved neighborhoods. I think that would cut out on a lot of the violence that we're seeing today that we don't focus on. If we would focus on the crime in our neighborhoods, and if we would focus on the mentally challenged, like we focused on COVID, then we will have done our job.
Okay, so it would be safe to say that the ideas that you would take to Congress would center on the mental health issues and underserved populations and the ills that are in those communities.
It's very safe to say, because when you have kids going to school hungry, you have kids without parents, when you have kids, as I said, raising themselves, when you have kids in neighborhoods that don't have recreation centers, when you have kids that have no way to get rid of that anxiety that they have, nobody paying them attention, and maybe the mom and the father not together, then maybe they're not getting the education that they need, things go awry. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay. Speaking of COVID, it has had a very negative effect on the economy. Thousands of families are facing eviction because of unemployment. The pandemic unemployment assistance and other federal unemployment aid is very much needed by a lot of people. Do you think that Governor DeWine was right to end these programs? And what impact do you think his decision will have on Ohioans?
Well, let me say this first. I think Governor DeWine has done a tremendous job when it comes to COVID. Matter of fact, he's been doing a tremendous job across the table. I can't say why he made this decision, so therefore I don't have opinion about why he made this decision and if it was a good decision, because if I had the data before me to see why he made this decision, then I can go one way or the other. But what I can say to you is, I'm not going to blame this on COVID. We've been having these problems since day one, long before COVID. COVID just made it transparent. You know, people out of work, people being evicted, people not having money to take their kids to childcare. These things are prevalent. They've been prevalent for years. COVID just shined a light on it. So I can't blame these things on COVID.
Okay. So would it be safe to say that you do not think that the governor was wrong in his decision?
I can say that I don't have an opinion because I don't know why he made that decision.
All right. With the increasing costs in college education, there has been a focus on vocational and technical programs, especially in urban communities, where test scores are a factor to college success. Do you think steering Black and Brown youth in this direction is beneficial? And what impact will it have on Black and Brown communities as it relates to Black and Brown people being underrepresented in fields such as law, medicine, science, and male educators?
Oh, that was a long question. But I'll do the best I can. If I don't answer, let me know. And
okay, I can go back to, yeah.
No, yeah. First of all, I do think it's good for people to have the access to technical schools. Everybody don't want to go to college. I mean, college isn't for everybody. So we should have those doors open for our youth if they decide to go a different direction. However, yeah, and I do think it's beneficial. However, I think that in the world where we are now, the makeup of jobs, or excuse me, the face of the jobs and employment has changed. We've moved into such a technical world now that people have to have a lot of science, a lot of math. And from the data that I've seen over the years, it certainly demonstrates that our urban communities are not up to snuff, or excuse me, that can be competitive. So I think our job is to make sure that these children are skilled with what we see today in this technology. To be honest with you, where we're headed now with these metrics and those kinds of things, we are still doing the old kind of math. In Britain and everywhere else, they do. I think it's metrics or leaders and all that stuff, right? Certainly things I wasn't schooled in. I mean, it's new. I mean, it's open to all the rest of the countries and things, but not the United States. So I guess what I'm saying is the only time we understand or we use those kinds of mathematical terms, I should say, is when we go to the liquor store and buy a liter of liquor or something like that. But our kids aren't taught those things in school. So we're under a different kind of system.
Okay, let me ask you this. I'm sorry to interrupt. We do only have a little bit more time left. I just want to get back to your thoughts on our communities being underrepresented in the fields of law, medicine, science, so forth and so on.
I don't think it's something that that is being pushed. I think it's a matter of opinion. I mean, a matter of people making up their own minds of what they want to do. First, I think it's too difficult for them because they don't have the background. A lot of them don't have the background. I'm not saying everybody. I'm saying there's a large portion of them that don't have that background. Then there's the college cost to go to school. There's a preparation.
Okay, I'm so sorry, Representative Smith. We are out of time. Again, I want to thank you for joining the second GCLEABJ 11th District Congressional Candidate Forum, and good luck.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.